Hello, this is Books of the Stock Market. How's everyone doing? As for me, I'm doing pretty well. So the DJI Osmo action camera that I bought is not living up to my expectations. Maybe my expectations were too high, but I was expecting perfect video stabilization while running. However, when I put it on my chest mount, the video is still quite shaky. I searched online and it says to strap the chest mount really tight, but I think it is on pretty tight already. I'll probably need to find a better mounting setup for running. Before explaining the two reasons stocks corrected last week, I'll just give a small update on my portfolio for the few people who are keeping up with my trades. For Bitcoin, I'm back up at 41.28% in unrealized gains. As for Ethereum, I'm up 186.58% in unrealized gains. And finally, for Litecoin, I'm up 22.54% in unrealized gains. I think I just added one Litecoin to my position since the last time I posted because I had some extra money lying around. Anyways, we all know why crypto is up, and it's because the $1.9 trillion stimulus bill was passed on Saturday. The confirmation of extra money coming to everyone's wallet gave crypto a nice boost, causing Bitcoin to trade up to $50,000 again. Putting the good news aside, let's move on to today's topic and how these topics will continue to pressure the stock market. In this video, we'll be going over what happened in the first week of March. More specifically, the last 2 weeks were horrible for the stock market. We saw huge corrections happen on all the major indices. Many people would attribute this to multiple delays surrounding the $1.9 trillion stimulus plan, which was eventually passed on March 6. However, compared to the two reasons I'm about to list, the stimulus plan is pretty insignificant. Oh, and yeah, remember to like, subscribe, and press the notification bell for me, as it really motivates me to make more videos. The first reason the past 2 weeks were horrible for the financial markets was due to the uncertainty if the Federal Reserve was going to initiate Operation Twist. Operation Twist is a monetary policy that stimulates the US economy by lowering long-term interest rates. They will lower long-term interest rates by buying long-term bonds while selling short-term bonds. The buying of long-term bonds allows the Federal Reserve to increase the price of bonds, meaning bond yields will fall. Bond yields will fall since the price to buy bonds increases. This means you'll be yielding less profits off the bonds you just bought since you paid more for it. Concurrently, the Federal Reserve will sell short-term bonds, which causes the yields to rise since the price of bonds will fall as there is more selling than buying. In short, bond prices and bond yields have an inverse relationship. The word twist comes from the shape of the yield curve when these transactions start. If you plot both long and short-term bond yields on a yield curve where the y-axis represents bond yields and the x-axis represents time, we should see the line representing long-term bond yields fall toward the x-axis, while the line that represents short-term bond yields rise. Therefore, we see the ends of the yield curve twist. So why does the Federal Reserve want to lower long-term bond yields? Bond yields have a direct relationship with interest rates. In short, banks decide interest rates based on bond yields. If bond yields rise, then banks set higher interest rates. Likewise, if bond yields fall, then banks set lower interest rates. Therefore, the Federal Reserve wants to lower long-term bond yields so interest rates can fall proportionally. Lower interest rates is a common tool the government uses to stimulate a falling or recovering economy. Lower interest rates incentivizes people to take out loans and spend more as the opportunity cost of borrowing money is way lower. Naturally, more spending helps revitalize a weakened economy. However, for the past couple of weeks, we saw bond yields rise, meaning interest rates started to rise as well. Ever since August 6, bond yields have been rising. The TNX, which tracks the 10-year Treasury yield, saw a 223% increase in price between August 6, 2020 and March 5, 2021. Interest rates rising is obviously not really helpful for an economy that was severely damaged by the recent COVID-19 pandemic. This rise in long-term bond yields and interest rates quickly produced noticeable problems. For instance, we saw the ever-prosperous housing market take a hit as we saw more than 200,000 new listings disappear. Likewise, mortgage rates rose above 3% for the first time since October. On top of that, the stock market took a hit as bonds started to seem more attractive. The stock market took a hit because institutional investors were moving money from stocks into bonds. They did this because bond yields are a safer asset and were also increasing in value. In the end, we saw the S&P 500 correct by 5.57%, while the Nasdaq 100 corrected by 12% for the past 2 weeks. Therefore, when the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell spoke on Thursday of last week, many were wondering if he would mention Operation Twist. With the Federal Reserve already supporting the fragile economy through quantitative easing, many were predicting Operation Twist was the next tool in the Federal Reserve's toolbox. The last time the Federal Reserve deployed Operation Twist was back in 2011 when the stock market crashed due to U.S. sovereign debt being downgraded for the first time in history. However, during his speech, he did not mention anything about combating rising yields, but instead reiterated his stance on being patient and leaving monetary policy as is until unemployment is back at pre-pandemic levels. The markets did not like the Federal Reserve maintaining the same monetary policy as before, as it implies no additional help will be arriving to the markets. Therefore, the markets dropped around 3% on March 4th when Chairman Powell spoke on Thursday. The second reason for the recent correction in the stock market was the Federal Reserve not extending SLRs for big Wall Street banks. SLR stands for the Supplementary Leverage Ratio, and in the simplest of terms, it measures how much money the bank has to hold and how much money they can spend. In April of last year, after the pandemic hit the US, the Federal Reserve allowed big banks to hold less money than is required. The Federal Reserve allowed banks to do this because the US was having liquidity issues. When COVID-19 hit the US, people started to deposit more money into their banks, or at the very least spend less money, as people did not know how extensive the effects of the pandemic will be. This caused banks to have more money than usual, which means there is less money exchanged in the real world. Obviously, less spending is bad for the economy and even worse when there is a pandemic, so the Federal Reserve stepped in and lowered the amount of cash banks needed to hold to help promote banks facilitate businesses and other financial projects. However, this grace period is expected to end on March 31st. Many people were expecting the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell to extend this grace period in his speech last Thursday, but as mentioned before, he reiterated that monetary policy will not change and no additional aid will be on its way. If this is the case, then banks will need to start increasing their cash reserve again. Banks can do this in multiple ways, ranging from writing less loans to raising more capital by issuing more stock. Whatever the method banks choose, all of them will stress the markets as less money will be in the economy. The worst part of all this is the US just passed a $1.9 trillion stimulus plan on March 6, which means more money will be injected into the US economy. As most states are still in lockdown and people are still wary of COVID-19, money will remain in people's bank accounts. Many banks are worried about what to do with all this money laying around in their banks when their sole purpose was to help stimulate the economy. The incoming stimulus money, in addition to the SLR grace period ending, will continue to pressure the US economy. With these two factors looming over the stock market, it is not clear if the US economy needs more aid from the Federal Reserve. We saw the US markets correct itself when Chairman Powell confirmed his stance on not providing any more help to the US markets. However, the markets are not always a clear indicator of truth, as they sometimes have a tendency to overreact. For now, time can only tell if the stock market is asking for help when it actually does not need help, or if the stock market actually needs help and has reacted appropriately last week. With that, I'm going to end this video. If you liked this video and want to watch more videos like this, press the subscribe button. If you thought this video helped you in any way, like this video as it really supports the channel. If you have any questions, leave a comment below and I'll try my best to answer the questions. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see everyone on Sunday. Bye.